Ladies and gentlemen, this is another episode with Track Bro here. Hope you guys can hear me okay. I know I'm on OBS here, but don't worry about that. Today I had an amazing presentation for you guys, and it's going to be on the Hellcat. Now, last year was truly the last year they were going to make the Hellcat. They've been making it for just under 10 years, and it is an absolute beast of a car, and it is really sad to see it go. And I believe that its legacy has been tainted recently over the internet. People bitching and whining on the internet and not really appreciating what the Hellcat gave out. And I am a Chevy guy, as you can tell, but I would consider getting a Hellcat once the prices go a little bit down. I think these cars are an absolute grab, sub 60 grand Canadian. That should be about 48 grand US. I think these are an absolute grab. Same thing with the C7 Corvettes, Z06. I think those are going to be extremely sought after. Of course, C6, same thing. But these ones are kind of going low on the radar. People are crapping on these left and right, and I think that it's not really deserving. And we're going to go into why. So, what is a Hellcat? Where did it come from? To really appreciate the Hellcat, you have to understand that when Dodge went into the shops and built their new Hemi with a Mercedes platform generation of cars, which was the Dodge Magnum, Challenger, Charger, and a bunch of other derivatives, the main goal was to create a car that muscle car enthusiasts could enjoy as well as the common person. And that was a really interesting take on the whole matter because its nameplates, the Challenger, Charger, and so on, had it the other way around, where they wanted really a luxury, nice car that most people would want to buy, and then they gave it a muscle car spin afterwards because that's how the culture was developed. With the Challenger and Charger, it was actually the other way around, and so the Hemi was built heavily on this, and they built one of the best engines of the last 25 years, at the very least. When they made the Hellcat, it was partially a reaction to the Shelby GT500 of yesteryear, which of course is SVT Cobra basically started it all off. But it was also a finally unlocking that performance that the Hemi and the Mercedes chassis allowed Dodge to do all along. And it was a huge kudos to SRT, which had lots of success with different tuning cars and products, but finally truly made one nameplate to rule them all. And the Hellcat had a lot of challenges in terms of building and in terms of going around emissions and other standards, and also being able to find its market to sell. And it absolutely deployed perfectly. It went all to plan. And the truth of the matter is that now that they stopped making it, we will not understand how good we had it until now. Every year we will mourn the Hellcat more and more, I believe, and this will skyrocket the prices, and we'll talk about that later. So let's just look on paper what the Hellcat came out of. So 2015 was a pretty interesting year. We had Chevy with their LSA engine, kind of the last years of their LSA engine, which was a supercharged 6.2. And we also had Mustang swapping over to their new generation of Mustangs and kind of showing it off and giving us a GT350 later that year. And we also had the last year of the LS7, which is a 7-liter LS engine, which is absolutely legendary, very, very good, up there with the Hellcats and so on. And the Hellcat was really the most left field idea they could have had. It was a pure straight line performance muscle car, which was, talked about and a little bit played with, but never in this true form. And it was an absolute revelation to exactly what kind of buyers the muscle car companies should be looking at, because it sold extremely well. Now, let's talk about one trope that all muscle cars, especially the straight line muscle cars, had, which was the lie and then the truth. Building up this mythology of a spec and then actually breaking that standard, actually breaking that spec sheet. And that allowed for multiple things to happen. For one, they were allowed to cheat the emissions, which is genius perfect. For two, it allowed to keep the costs down at the dealership, and those who were in the know were in the know. They were going to buy them. And those who weren't in the know were not going to hype them up, which meant that the cost could go down for most people. And that was an incredible strategy for the muscle cars, but specifically for the Hellcat. Let's start with horsepower. It's a straight line beast. The lie was it made 707 horsepower, which was the most that any muscle car made at that time. The closest being the GT500, which made about 670. The truth was that was closer to at the wheels and really on some very low dynos that didn't really have any air. It almost made 800 horsepower all day. We're talking 790-ish horsepower. And what really made the Hellcat special over the other platforms is that it was built absolutely incredibly powerful. When we talk about GT500 performance, the 500 to 600 horsepower that it had was really pushed out and was really hard to make a lot more performance out of it. Those pistons just couldn't handle the performance. Even the crank at some point would just snap, which is ridiculous for a Shelby muscle car, but they had to save money somewhere, right? With the Hemi, they could really bump out all that performance out of the Hemi, and it wouldn't really cost them all that much. They just had that budget that they could afford with cheaping out every other component of the car, including the chassis, of course, as we know, the Mercedes chassis, which didn't ride all that good for a sports car. With a simple tune, these cars, full bolt-ons, we're talking pretty much not changing anything from the internals of the engine, not really even touching the deck or touching the heads. You can make 1200 horsepower, no problem. And I will have videos later, I believe, that will show off what that power means. Another lie that I think was partially the specs on the spec sheet, but also it was propagated already with the Dodge owners and so on and so forth, was that this car was a heavy pig. It was 4,600 pounds on paper, and this was not so great for the avid buyer, the avid sports buyer, I would say, the sports car buyer. I mean, between this and an SS1LE, it just seemed to make more sense to get the SS1LE. It was cheaper and so on and so forth. The truth was that a wide body Hellcat was known to be about 4,500 pounds, which was already the widest, with the widest tires, Hellcat that you could buy. This is including all liquids. This is a real person weight checker, and it only calculated at 45 pounds, 4,500 pounds. Now that is not curb weight. The truth is that it would actually hit about 42-25 pounds with no rear seats and a couple of other little changes. Really nothing extraordinary. So for a 4,200 pound car making 707 horsepower, well actually 800 horsepower, the 700 figure was at the wheels, I mean, it's starting to make a lot of sense for the avid buyer to buy this. Looking at the actual performance figures, again, we get that wish-wash. On paper, it's about 3.7 to 3.4 seconds 0 to 60. Some people were reporting 4.1 seconds, with their sporty tire and not their high tread tire, track tire. And on a quarter mile, we were talking about 11.2, fully stock with some Mickey Thompsons. But the reality of it is that most people got into the mid to high 10 seconds with absolutely nothing done. 3.6 seconds 0 to 60 was extremely common, and the 3.4 mark just didn't do it justice. top speed was 202 miles per hour. And this was really the first car that on YouTube you could see hit 10 seconds back to back to back to back. The only other cars that were able to do that at this point were the a built CL1, which, needed a supercharger. I mean, that's not too bad, but it's another couple grand. And the SVT Cobra, which, same thing, pulleys, maybe a port, and you were there. But otherwise, there was no car that you could buy out the dealership and do these 10-second mile runs easily. The lateral G's tell the story a little bit better. In acceleration, we're talking 0.95 to 1.01 G's acceleration. Now, if you don't know how much that is, that's a pretty good metric for most sports cars. It's not incredible, but it's not, something to scoff at. But in the figure eights, and we look at just how powerful this is here, it was hitting 0.8 G's on a regular basis in the figure eight. Now, Motor Trend does the same test for pretty much any car, any sports car, and the GT350 managed a 0.83, and a Cayman S manages a 0.86. In some trims, it'll do a 0.89. So to hit 0.80 G's on a figure eight on a really big, what you call a heavy pig car, is actually really incredible. It's not an SUV. It's not a truck. It's much closer in line with your other cars. So that the lateral G's acceleration figure was multiple times disputed, and with the Dodge Demon and also the Hellcat Red Eye unlocked, we were able to finally get the actual figures, and some people were able to hit 1.5 and in some cases 1.7 G's with this car, and that was with a good tire compound with some suspension tricks up its sleeve. But that's just kind of what happened. The engine was overpowering the chassis. That's the truth of it. And now, okay, we could get into the muscle car tradition and what that means, but it's just the truth of the matter. That's what happened. The tuning figures were another aspect that completely revolutionized the entire industry. Now, for that decade, it was really quite known for people to make 600, 700 horsepower out of multiple mods. We're talking the Toyota Supras, the SVT Cobras of the world, and so on. But the Hellcat, making about 670 wheel horsepower, completely stock, could FBO, no supercharger ports, just E85 pulley injectors and so on, could make 1,000 wheel horsepower. Now that was something else, because before it needed a lot, like your engine needed a lot of modifications. With your lucky SVT Cobra, the block would handle that 1,000 horsepower, but there were some things you had to change, whether it's head ports or whatnot. It was quite a lot of work. I mean, I would do it. It's worth it. But this is the first time where a regular guy could buy this thing, let's say Friday, and Sunday could be running on the dyno at 1,000 wheel horsepower. It's an incredible thing. And then finally, and really to just drag that point all the way to the end of the mile here, the MSRP. The Hellcat started at a $61,000 MSRP, which is, absolutely incredible for the performance. This was compared to the ZL1, which was about $5,000 less, and this is a 2015 LSA. It was 70 grand or more for a Z28 and a GT350 of that year and later years. So how do I put this? Let's just say most people that were not in the know really were grinning and were unhappy, were biting their lips, because that was incredible. Now, in the lifespan of the Hellcat, we've gotten multiple generations of versions and tunes and packages. And, the big ones were the Hellcat Red Eye Unlocked, or Jailbreak, sorry. The Demon, of course, and then recently the newer Demons, including the Demon 170. Now, that one we're not going to talk about. It's just they really didn't make that many. But for those generations, what do you get? Well, you really just get what you had from the factory with a couple of modifications and with a slight MSRP adjustment for what they put into the car. That was pretty much it. Everything else was kept on its own. And that was an incredible thing, because with the GT350, I mean, there were 3 MSRP changes and 0 modification changes to the car. The Z28, they basically couldn't even afford making them, so they made it for 2 years and stopped. The ZL1 is the only exception here, where it actually got much better with the LT4 engine, and it's really the only one that I would compare with the Hellcat. I mean, let's not even talk about the new GT500. That thing, they made it for 2 years and then they quit, right? So it's really good, and I think that we have to understand, how do we actually destroy the competition? How would you go about making a car that destroys the competition? And here I have some videos that would show you. So the first one, hold on, let me grab a new window here. So the first one here is having a vision of what you want to do. That's really the first part. So here we have a Hellcat quarter mile. Now this is miles. So we got the tires, sticky tires. And I promise you this is stock. And he goes for the quarter mile in 10.8 seconds. So that's the vision. And they did it. Then is the requirements, which is beating the royalty. Oops. So this 850 horsepower Hellcat versus an 800 horsepower. This is an earlier zero detail flat. Rear so here we have it absolutely destroyed. So 10.3. That's completely differently. Then we have the surprise, which was the tunability, and also the Tesla surprise that we got. Around this time, Tesla finally came out with the ludicrous package, and it was pretty much Elon Musk saying, hey, listen, we want to get into the performance gig, because I think a lot of electric car enthusiasts would like that. And the Hellcat just absolutely destroyed it. So there we have them going at it. It looks like it's pretty close. And here you got 11.9. So that's just destroyed. Then we have it running it back. So here's a Charger Hellcat, so it's automatic for sure. Doing a 9-second. And then it goes on sub 10 seconds. Oh, my bad, guys. Six. So that was a surprise to the whole world, because it was unheard of to go sub 10 seconds with a, I mean, stock looking car. That was just ridiculous. Unheard of. Here is the incredible surprise, which is a built gap pack stock motor, but track built, so ripped to pieces in the interior, and it's just smoking track cars legally on the road, SCC, and it's just having a blast doing it. That's really the surprise with the Mercedes chassis. smokes track cars, which is a surprise to be had. And finally here is just making sure that you guys understand. That's what you could be living with on a daily basis. I would like that, personally. So let's go back to that initial reaction here. Why the hate? So despite the legendary status of the Hellcat, it seems the company gets the most hate of the big three. This is pre Charger Daytona launch for the electric. I just noticed that pretty much anywhere you go online, it's almost as if owners or let's call it viewers don't understand why do we like Hellcats, and they think it's about the numbers. They don't like seeing the numbers. They don't like seeing the footage. They think it's a slow car. And I think part of it is just that, well, listen, if you're going to build an incredible muscle car, I mean, I'm just saying the Corvette might be a better deal. Or, if you want something that has back seats and is a little lighter, the Camaro might make some sense. And finally, if you want a cheap, brand new, boostable muscle car, then the Mustang makes some sense. So why the Hellcat doesn't really get that attention? Well, it's just a different beast, right? It's the tunability. You want that stock motor ready for everything. The truth is that the Hellcat sold more than the Chevy Performance, and the Tesla Ludicrous combined. If you look at the GT350 and GT500 of these years, the Chevy Performance, which is any of the Vs, any of the ZL1s and Z06s, the supercharged ones, Hellcat still beats it. And then you could just add the Tesla Ludicrous on top of it. I mean, they sold basically just a couple thousand and boom. That's just what I'm saying. Like, they sold so many of these things because they were good. And, all the hate is partially meaningless in the large scheme of things. But in this case, I mean, Dodge won. That's the truth. Now, let's look at some comparisons and kind of discuss about that buying opportunity that I was saying. So, should you buy a Hellcat before they are gone? Before there are none that are going to be sold under the sun? And I think that it really comes down to three things. And it's really based off of other cars that I've learned that are not necessarily the best value, that are a little bit more risky to buy. I think the Hellcat is a no-brainer, by the way. The first is the fact that it's extremely depreciated. I think that the Hellcat is never going to go more down than it is. The engine itself is worth 35 grand or more, just in parts alone. We're not even talking about the actual crate. And one car that I learned my lesson with was the Nissan GTR. Now that thing, I think in 2019, it was around 60 grand Canadian, 40 grand US, if it's a JDM and so on. And I thought that was never going to go down more than that. In reality, it just never went up. That's the problem, because it was actually overhyped. It took a lot more money than I thought to build it nice. And when you did build it nice, it just didn't make any sense. So the GTR was actually overpriced for most people. And yeah, on paper, it made a lot of sense, but it seems as though it gravitated buyers to buy it and then basically sit on it. And that's not what you want to hear. You want to hear something that is that depreciated, that you can use and still make that money back. The second aspect is the uniqueness or sought after aspect. Now, I learned my lesson with the SVT Cobra. So the supercharged ones were not sought after at all. And for a really long time, were not even that unique for the avid buyer. I mean, think of it this way. 600 horsepower, 700 horsepower. That's great and all. When am I going to use that? One. Two, is it a pretty car? A lot of people hated the New Edge design for a very long time. It was commonly known. I mean, that's why they're considered underappreciated. And finally, if I did like the SVT Cobra, and this is what I'm asking myself right now, actually, I do like the SVT Cobra. Do I want to pay the 25-30 grand premium on basically a supercharged engine and pretty much nothing else? Or do I want to build it myself? I mean, you buy a 4-valve 4.6, you put yourself another 10, 15 grand of mods, and there you go. It's the same thing. That doesn't make very much sense for most people. The Hellcat, however, is a car show popper. If you are putting in 35 grand worth of mods in your Challenger RT, I mean, you're already at current day Hellcat money. Now, talk about this in 10, 20 years. I mean, the Hellcat is going to stand the test of time. And that's just what I think, in my opinion. The parts are going to be more expensive, and once that happens, that's it. Finally, is the tunability. Now, some people, they love tuning their cars, and that makes perfect sense. I mean, you got the car for it. But what you have to understand is that despite having all the tuner cars you could think of, you're going to lose money by tuning. You put 10, 15, 20 grand worth of parts in your car, and it's just not going to be worth it. And I learned my lesson with the Toyota Supra. Now, all three of these, you're going to lose the money, but with the Supra, it's ridiculous. I mean, they're 25 grand now. They're going to be 15 grand in the future, and putting in mods is just not going to do it. A lot of these $150,000 Supras, it's because they had really unique parts. They one-off parts, carbon ceramics, and so on. That's why, they just weren't worth it for most people. And I just want to finish the video by saying, chase your dreams, guys. If you like the Hellcat, don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Get the Hellcat. It is absolutely worth it. If you have the money to shell out, or if you can finance it, if you're looking to get better credit line and you have the money, you will have the money. I think the Hellcat is a no-brainer. These things, you can sit on them and they'll make money. You can build them, they'll make money. You can track them even, and they'll make money for you. So just go ahead, and I just want to say thank you and salute.